All right. Hello, everyone. Once again, we are back. Cal CMC Cohen, joined by Taylor Trig Brooks. What are we here to talk about today, Taylor?
Talking about the last three elite specs: Conduit for the Revenant, Amalgam for the Engineer, and Evoker for the Elementalist.
Yeah, so, we'll reiterate some of the stuff that we said at the start of every stream, so this might sound familiar to everyone who's obviously been watching all three of these streams, but we are leading up to the beta, so you're going to see a lot of stuff that is, it's not going to be perfectly balanced. Maybe there's some art that's still being worked on, some designs that aren't quite optimal or, quite where we want them to be, but that's kind of the goal of the beta event in the first place, is we're getting some stuff in front of you, all the players, in definitely a playable state, but not necessarily an optimal state. And we're going to gather a bunch of feedback over the course of that event and take that and find a lot of opportunities to improve these specializations as we get closer to the launch of the expansion.
Yep.
Anything you want to add? Yep.
Yeah. Normally at the end of every profession, we kind of hover over the tooltips for people to get screenshots, but we've done some of the work ahead of time, and there should be a link in the chat. There's going to be a forum thread that'll have an album of all of the skills and traits after we cover that section. So easier to obtain for you guys, less work on your end. So look forward to that.
We won't have a bunch of awkward silence at the end of each specialization as we do some hovering. Unfortunately, Roy could not join us today. He had a prior engagement, but surely we'll see him at some point in the future. Let's just go ahead and dive in. It's going to be, we've been running pretty long on these streams because there's a lot to talk about, and we will continue to do so such that we can talk about everything there is to talk about. We're going to kick things off with the Conduit here. We can see, starting with Legendary Entity Stance, we are obviously invoking the power of Raza. So there's also one other new mechanic. We'll get into the legend skills in a minute here, but we're going to start off with this new F2 button for the Conduit. This is going to be Cosmic Wisdom. And this is going to draw a lot of inspiration from some of the elite form skills that you guys might be familiar with from the Dervish profession of Guild Wars 1. Obviously, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to channel human gods on a specialization that is usable by multiple races. So instead, we are going to be channeling a lot of different professions. So we see here Raza will be kind of representing the Dervish profession. People familiar with Raza know able to use every profession in Guild Wars 1 after some things got figured out. But he will be representing the Dervish here, or they will be representing the Dervish here. So what we can see here is that it's kind of like a stance. I'll probably call it a stance a bunch of times on the stream here. It is not a stance skill type. It does not care about things that care about stances, but it is mechanically kind of similar to a stance in that when we activate this is going to give you some stats, and it's also going to give you kind of an on-hit effect. Again, similar to a lot of the form skills of Guild Wars 1. So looking at the Cosmic Wisdom for the Dervish here, we're going to get all stats. This is going to be kind of the most powerful of all of the forms in that sense. We'll see some higher numbers on some more restricted stat combinations as we get to other legends. Because the idea here is that your active legend determines the Cosmic Wisdom that is available to you. So with Raza, we will get these bonus stats, and then we'll create a scythe when we strike an enemy to deal damage to nearby enemies. So let's take a look. This will happen around you, so pretty good with melee weapons where you're already going to be in melee range. You see it's kind of bonus scythe attack happening every so often. This can only happen once every interval, so you can't get an infinite amount of scythes, especially scythes trigger off themselves, but this is kind of a nice callback to the Dervish, who obviously used scythe as one of their main weapons. So as you can see, the duration here is a little short, but the extra mechanic here that we see with this specialization is the affinity mechanic. The way that this works, baseline, there's going to be a lot of traits that care about affinity, so we'll get into those in a handful of minutes here. But every time you use a legend skill that costs energy, which is a lot of them, then you will build up a stack of affinity. And the way that this works is that it will extend the duration of your Cosmic Wisdom. So in general, you want to use some legend skills. I'll press some buttons that do some things that we'll talk about in more detail shortly, but we see that we built up to 3 stacks of affinity here, so activating Cosmic Wisdom is going to give us a much longer duration of that effect. There's also going to be some other traits that care about your affinity, so we'll be talking a bit more about that as we get into the trait section as well. You saw some other stuff happen when I pressed Cosmic Wisdom, so that might give you some hints toward what some of the traits are. Notably, when you swap legends, that's going to reset your affinity back to 0. The idea is you're kind of building up, well, your affinity or your rep with the legend, your bond with the legend that you are currently invoking. So it resets back to 0 as you swap legends. You'll obviously get some energy back, get some new skills that you can press to build up that affinity again. But let's just go ahead and look at the other Cosmic Wisdoms. Malix here is going to be representing the Mesmer profession. I don't know if Malix really had a profession in Guild Wars, but they're both purple, so it makes a lot of sense. But obviously Malix is more of that condition-focused legend, so we're going to see a lot of condition stuff, which Mesmer obviously does a lot of torment and confusion and some bleeding as well, so it makes sense. So the form of the Mesmer here, bonus condition damage, bonus expertise, and then on hit, you're going to be inflicting one of these damaging conditions, whether it's bleeding, torment, or confusion. So you can just take a quick look at that. See some conditions being applied to these golems as we strike them. Moving on to the Centaur stance. This is going to be Cosmic Wisdom of the Monk. Bentari, very much that supportive character. Don't know if he ever saw a lot of combat, but a lot of themes of Ventari make sense with the monk, so we're going to see kind of this self-sustaining, gives you some healing power, gives you some vitality as you channel this, and then also going to give you this kind of on-hit healing buff that you'll see a bit better if I'm actually in combat. You can see you're just getting some, a little bit of that coming from the tablet, of course, but we are getting some nice healing procs here. Next up, we'll look at Shiro, obviously representing the assassin, legendary assassin sense. This one is kind of the most on the nose. We do see that the form of the assassin grants you bonus power, bonus ferocity, leading into that power DPS. And also going to be inflicting some debilitating conditions here, whether it's crippled, weakness, or vulnerability. Again, I just see the same stuff. So we're getting some vulnerability from the sword auto as well. And we are getting the lowest duration of this Cosmic Wisdom. So again, you will want to build up your affinity and get the maximum duration to give you the maximum value of this stat bonus, these on-hit effects. And last but not least, we have Jalis, channeling the form of the warrior. This one makes a lot of sense because, Jalis is a warrior. This is going to give you some more personal defense. We're going to see toughness, concentration, giving some boon duration to play into these kind of defensive boons on hit. You could get resistance, protection, or resolution. The same idea. It's just kind of like, one of the introductory mechanics is this Cosmic Wisdom. And this does, I am not cheating my recharge. You will note that this recharge does not refresh by default as you swap legends. So you will have to kind of pick and choose which legend you want to channel that form of and get this bonus for, because it's not going to reset as you swap legends. So now we talked about that, we can hop into the entity stance skills themselves. So we're going to see a lot of, I'll just hover one of the skill facts here as we're talking, but we're going to see a lot of kind of flexibility as each of the first 4 skills that we're going to look at has kind of an association with another legend as well. So we see this resonance mechanic being explained. On the healing skill, it's going to be resonant to Centaur stance. And the idea is that based off the other legend that you have equipped, there will be a bonus effect if you have the matching legend. So here, if we have Centaur, which we don't, but we can kind of show off the base of this skill, and then we'll show the Centaur version of the skill. But as you can see, this is just going to be a personal kind of pulse healing. Let's comment again. Pulse heal, get some damage reduction. This skill is called Shielding Hands, so it gets that Guild Wars 1 callback. We see some damage reduction, we see some healing. And then the idea is that if you have Centaur stance, this is going to change the skills just a little bit, where this heal is also going to affect allies, and it's going to extend the duration of that Shielding Hands. So if we come over here, now that we have Centaur equipped, we see that allies are being healed, and we see that damage reduction lingering just a bit longer. So kind of the goal of these skills is that the baseline effect is a good skill, and then we'll see that the kind of the resonant bonus makes the skill, you know, I don't want to say overtuned, but a bit above budget, because there is only one of these 4 skills that will get kind of that empowered effect depending on your alternate legend. And we will see the elite skill, spoiler, does get a resonance bonus regardless of what your other legend is, and it's just a different bonus based off the legend. But basically, you will get a bonus effect on one of your skills plus the elite, depending on your alternate legend. So that's starting off with the healing skill, pretty straightforward. Next up, we'll see the Assassin Resonance Beguiling Haze. This is going to be a pretty powerful mobility tool that has a bit of crowd control attached as well. So the way that this is going to work is we're going to send out kind of a fragment of Raza. And this is going to potentially strike your enemy, and if it does, you'll teleport to them, get a pretty short daze, and then you will be able to reactivate this skill a couple of times, assuming that you continue to hit enemies. An important note is that the daze out of range, I recommend being in range, but the daze of this skill will not hit the same target multiple times, so you will still get that refresh, so you can get it kind of multiple times for the damage, but if you are striking the same enemy, that is not going to be dazing the same enemy multiple times. So if you want to maximize the value of that component, you're going to be dashing kind of between different enemies here. Yeah, recommend being in range, but that's what the range indicator on the skill is for, right? And then if you are also channeling Shiro on your alternate legend, we're going to see that this becomes a ground target. So this gives you a lot more flexibility in kind of where you dash to, because obviously you can go up. There's not a lot of Z-axis here, but you will be able to like port up a ledge or whatever. A lot more flexibility. Notably, you still do need to hit an enemy in order to get the refresh, but you can still use it as a better escape. Notably, the AoE, the daze and the strike are AoE on the resonant component here as well. Next up, we'll take a look at Gladiator's Defense. This is going to be the stun break and also the dwarf resonant skill. We see that this is just kind of a nice little quick activating stun break. It's going to do a little attack around you as well. This is going to inflict weakness. If you strike someone, you're going to get resistance, you're going to get resolution. And this kind of has a similar idea to one of the skills we saw before, where if you break a stun, it's going to cost a little bit more, so it will drain additional energy from you. But if you just want to use this as a strike, as a weakness applicator, as a boon generator, then it's just going to have a much lower baseline cost, and then only if you are breaking stun will this cost additional energy. The resonance bonus here is that if you are channeling Jalis as well, then the additional energy cost will not be taxed or consumed or whatever you want to call it. You always get the low cost of this skill, so a very powerful stun break. If you have Jalis as your alternate legend, you will also be granting these boons to nearby allies. Last up, we have the Demon Stance Resonance Hex Eater Vortex. This is going to be a condition removal skill, and that will also be a bit of condition damage. The way that this skill works is by default, you will throw a projectile and remove 5 conditions from yourself. And if you actually remove conditions from yourself, I am not currently removing conditions from myself, but you'll see that additional, I'm going to put some conditions on myself real quick. We will get some additional projectiles being thrown here. So I'll get some burning, get some bleeding, and here we see 3 projectiles being fired as I removed 2 conditions from myself. So that will be up to 6 projectiles. Obviously, just a 5 condition removal from yourself is a pretty powerful skill. And notably, if you have the Demon Resonance, this will always throw the maximum number of projectiles, and it will always throw at the nearest target. So this just gives it a lot more usability as that Conduit DPS skill, which is relevant, assuming you have Malix. You are probably going to be playing a condition damage build, so you don't need to worry about having conditions on you. You're always going to get the maximum damaging aspect of this skill. I'm going to take a quick drink of water as we hover probably the longest tooltip in the entire game on a single skill. But you might think of this skill as 4 different skills, so it's pretty fair that this tooltip is this long, right? So the way this works is, like I said earlier, there's always going to be a resonance effect. So we see all the different resonance effects here: Assassin Stance, Demon Stance, Centaur Stance, Dwarf Stance. The base of this skill is just that you and Raza will kind of attack together. You'll spawn Raza at a target location. You'll both perform a nice, powerful scythe attack. And then we will see additional effects based off the legend. So here right now I have Malix, and what's happening is the fragment of Raza is going to do a kind of a shatter explosion as it disappears. That's going to inflict some confusion. So again, leaning into that more condition damage focused aspect. If we have the Assassin, that's going to get you some bonus damage. Again, leaning into the most powerful strike damage version of this skill. And if you and the fragment both strike an enemy, that enemy will be immobilized. So here, I cast it at range, but casting it in melee, getting that immobilized on all these targets. Pretty powerful setup. And again, going to be like the largest damaging version of the skill. Next up, we can take a look at Ventari. So if we have Centaur Resonance, we're going to also do a little bit of healing around ourselves and around Raza. There we see a bit of healing coming through. And this is also going to do some condition removal based off enemies struck. So notably, you will want to potentially strike some enemies if you want to remove conditions from yourself, or you can use it as kind of like a ranged support skill as you cast it on allies only. Or, maybe you're in World v World and you're able to cast it on top of allies and enemies and kind of get the full value of this skill. Then last up, we have the Dwarf Resonance. This is going to give some defensive boons again. On activation, we see getting some stability, getting that resolution, getting some resistance, and the kind of team up double hit component of this is that you will stun enemies that are struck by both you and Raza. So again, pretty decent damage as well. We see some baseline might being generated, we see some baseline bleeding being applied, and then some extra bonuses based off which resonant legend you have also on your bar. It's a pretty fun skill with a lot of flexibility. Next up, we can take a look at some traits. Just wanted to add anything, Taylor?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways to play this. We can see the resonance adds different things to each build. Like if you're a Conduit, you're going to play Malix and really get a strong resonance with the Hex Eater, put a lot of throughput there. But you won't, say if you're playing the Assassin, you get a lot more mobility. So it's a way to really focus in on what we want specs to be doing when we play these things without having to worry about how, the interchange between them. Like if you're a Jawless build, you won't have that, really crazy mobility, but you'll get a lot better defenses there. So really trying to heighten what the core legends want to do while you're playing with Raza.
Yeah, for sure. So let's run through the traits we see here. Enigmatic Connection, this is going to be the baseline. Explain the spec. So you can obviously scroll through all the different Cosmic Wisdoms here if you want to, or you can look at the album that we posted with all of these tooltips as well, or you'll probably catch them on social media somewhere else as well after the stream. Then the first adept, the first minor trait that actually does something. We see that based off your equipped legends, you're going to get some extra stat bonuses. So the active legend will also give you a little bit of a bonus on top of this here. So here I am currently invoking Raza, so I'll be getting 75 to all stats instead of 50 to all stats, and then Jawless as my off legend is currently giving me 120 toughness, but if I swap to Jawless, then I'll be getting 180 toughness from that, and then the 50 all stats from Raza. So this again kind of just gives you those build defining stats based off which legends you have equipped and kind of what expectation your build has, whether it's more damage focused, healing focused, condition focused, or defense focused. And then we have Numinous Gift. This is a trait that some of you may have noticed going off as we were pressing Cosmic Wisdom, but this is going to give you boons based off which legends you have equipped. So as we see Raza giving us Fury, Jalis will give us Stability right here as we press Cosmic Wisdom. If you have other legends, you will have other boons being applied every time that you activate Cosmic Wisdom. So Raza, Fury, it's fine, but it is kind of the weakest of the boons here, but Raza is kind of the most flexible of the specialization of the legends and gives you a lot of opportunity to do different things, whereas the others are a lot more specialized. We see the protection from Inventari, stability on Jalis, resistance from Malix, and a bunch of might with Shiro. So we can move into the adept traits, starting with conductive armaments. This is going to give you kind of an extra source of affinity. So now anytime they use a weapon skill that costs energy, you will also be getting affinity. So we're going to just press a weapon skill, and I believe I need to be in combat, which is the problem here. And there we go, actually got some affinity. So this makes it just a bit easier to build up that affinity. Some legends have more expensive legend skills, would make it a little bit more difficult. So maybe in those cases you want to be playing with this trait so you can build up that affinity cap a bit quicker and fire off that max value Cosmic Wisdom. Next up we have Ethereal Purification. This is going to be a really powerful condition removal option, and here's one of those traits that cares about affinity. So as you build up affinity, once you hit the cap, you'll get a condition removal, 2 condition removals rather, and then again, anytime that you activate Cosmic Wisdom, that's going to give you 2 additional condition removals. So this is potentially really strong because affinity does reset as you swap legends, so we can kind of swap to a legend, build up that 3 affinity, cleanse 2 conditions, then fire off Cosmic Wisdoms, cleanse 2 more conditions, and then maybe we swap legends and start building up that affinity again and get another Condi removal in a pretty quick succession, potentially. Last up, we have Expanded Consciousness. This one's going to give you a larger affinity pool, so this will obviously allow you to build up to 5 affinity, which is going to give you even additional duration on Cosmic Wisdom. We will see some traits pretty shortly here that there will be kind of a build that is more focused on Cosmic Wisdom, so you might want to play this affinity bonus trait so you can really lean into that mechanic. First of them is Recurring Insight. So the idea here is that when you swap legends, you will reduce the recharge of Cosmic Wisdom for each point of affinity. So, we look at this skill with a base cooldown of about 20 seconds. If we build up to 5 affinity because we have Expanded Consciousness, let's just go ahead and do that. We can stop cheating for just a little bit. I need to, again, put myself in combat. Build up to maximum affinity, then we swap legends. We see a big cooldown reduction coming through on the Cosmic Wisdom, and then it's much more readily available, because if you are again at 5 affinity stacks, that's going to be a 9-second duration, potentially reduced to a 10-second cooldown, so maybe you get a little bit of alacrity in there, and then you can potentially now have a full uptime of the Cosmic Wisdom bonus that you could bounce between legends, or maybe you swap and then swap back and try to really maximize the uptime of a single legend's Cosmic Wisdom. Next up, we have Lingering Determination. So this is going to give you kind of some bonus affinity back, or a single affinity back when you swap legends. And I don't believe it's indicated in this tooltip at the moment, but you do need to have 3 affinity at least to get this trigger. So we can kind of show this off again real quick. Press some buttons, press some more buttons, and then we're going to swap legends here. And I didn't even have the trait equipped. Great demonstration. But notably, this will also heal yourself and gain endurance when gaining affinity. So this is another trait that's pretty useful with Expanded Consciousness, because if you are at the affinity cap, you can't actually gain affinity for this trigger. You will need to swap legends. So this just gives you a little bit more space to build this up. 5 triggers every legend as opposed to 3. But this is a pretty strong heal, get some endurance back, and of course will be triggering when you swap and get an affinity back for free, assuming you meet the requirements and equip the trait. I would recommend it. Last up, we have Boundless Knowledge. This is just going to really power up those Cosmic Wisdom effects. This lists all the bonuses to the stats, but we're also going to get some bonuses to all of the on-hit components here. So we see some extra stuff here, getting a little bit of a daze attached to the Scythe as part of the bonus of Cosmic Wisdom for the Dervish. And we can kind of scroll through all of these over here on the minor trait as well. We can see that Assassin getting some extra damage, getting some extra stats, getting that extra cripple, weakness, vulnerability. I'm actually getting the daze from a different trait. Don't believe me. Just getting some extra damage on the Dervish Scythe. Then we see kind of some similar patterns, increased condition durations, increased healing, increased boon durations, and so on and so forth. So this really just powers up those Cosmic Wisdoms. You can kind of make this kind of a burstier trait as opposed to Recurring Insight, which gives you more uptime overall, but this is going to give you more potency every time that you activate Cosmic Wisdom, and still going to be good with Expanded Consciousness because, again, you can have that longer duration of this effect. Notably, the daze was coming from Misfire, and this is the first Grandmaster trait, going to be more condition damage focused. Anytime you disable an enemy, you're going to inflict conditions on them, notably burning. And then when you activate Cosmic Wisdom, that's going to do a little bit of damage and a little bit of daze. To kind of get a guaranteed trigger there, you can obviously be getting some additional disables coming from maybe the hammer or what other weapons you so choose. This does have a small internal cooldown, so you can't staff 5 through somebody and get maybe 200 stacks of burning or whatever number you want. There is some amount of a safety valve there, but still a very powerful trait. Next up, we have Twofold Embodiment. This is going to cause Cosmic Wisdom to grant you all the bonuses for both legends. So we see that we currently have Raza and Jalis equipped, and we're going to get both Form of the Warrior and Form of the Dervish when we activate Cosmic Wisdom. Again, a trait that makes Boundless Knowledge kind of even more impactful because you will be getting the empowered version of both of your legends' Cosmic Wisdom. So a pretty powerful effect if you're leaning into that kind of combination of traits especially. And last up we have Perpetual Wisdom. This is kind of shifting the gameplay around Cosmic Wisdom. It's going to turn it into an upkeep skill, and so this will work with all of your upkeep traits. Things that care about upkeep will get that count of 3 as you're upkeeping Cosmic Wisdom, and this will just kind of give you more uptime of this effect at the cost of energy. I guess potentially an infinite uptime if all you want to do is channel Cosmic Wisdom and auto attack with your sword. Probably pretty solid. And there is another extra component here that when you swap legends, you will get some energy back for each point of affinity. So another trait that is quite good with Expanded Consciousness, but still pretty good with the cap of 3 affinity. You get between 15 and 25 energy back when you swap. So that's all we got for the Conduit. Obviously, as we talked about, a lot of flexibility depending on what you choose to kind of specialize in based off your build, which alternate legend you have equipped. You don't have to play Raza with this elite spec, of course, but it is a pretty powerful legend for pretty much every build, so we would expect to see a lot of Raza and alternate legend of choice based off what your build is trying to do. I'm just going to go ahead and get set up for our next demo, which will be the Amalgam.
Yep, and as we mentioned, all those tooltip screenshots are going to be on the forum. There's a pinned link to it, so we don't have to take all the time to hover through it. But now it is slime time. Talking about the Mercurial mold, the Amalgam. Conduit was also pretty versatile. This one, I think it's got a beat in versatility. This is probably the most versatile elite spec I can think of. Cal's loaded in here, so you see the UI. You can see 3 blank slots. They might look familiar. They're basically like utility slots. Cal can show you the menu. Pop it up. You can pick any of those. So we have 7 more skills, 3 slots, a lot of permutations here. Before we go into what they do, we can talk about the new F5. It's going to be Evolve. So if Cal hovers over it, it's just pretty simple.
What does it
says
do?
Evolve.
It evolves.
So this one, you're going to kind of like merge with your slime, become one, and it's going to give you bonuses based on the more skills that you have selected in your F2 through F4 slots. So baseline, all it does is just give you a bit of an attribute increase, nothing special, but the real bonuses are going to come as we get into those more skills. Quick side note is that you can see that the F1 is still not selectable. That one is just going to be a normal healing tool belt skill. We decided to keep it there because, for one, medkit exists. A really big part of medkit is having that F1 mending heal. But another part is that we do have trait triggers based on healing tool belt slots now, and we want to keep that as something we can work with. So we didn't want you to have to decide, I need this skill in this F1 slot because that's the lowest cooldown, I'm going to proc those more. We just wanted you to put where you felt comfortable putting those skills as you would utilities. But we can get into it. So the more skills are going to be divided. There are a couple defensive ones and a couple offensive ones. So the first one is going to be the defensive protocol Protect. When it's used, it's just going to give you a block for a duration. Pretty simple, pretty good. Having a block in your tool belt slot is, pretty powerful. But you also see at the bottom of that tooltip, you have the Resilient Strain. And these strain bonuses are what I talked about, how it's going to upgrade Evolve. So you see here that Resilient Strain grants you a barrier and resistance when you evolve. So it's a pretty big barrier. This one's super defensive, as I keep saying. This one's probably the strongest defense you can get out of all of the morph skills. But that's just going to be one of the 3 bonuses you get, so it's already pretty strong. We can move on to the next one, though, is going to be Defensive Protocol Cleanse. It does what it says. It's going to cleanse you. It's going to convert damaging conditions to barrier and non-damaging conditions to protection. So it's going to kind of single out both. So if you have a lot of non-damaging on you, but some pretty heavy damaging conditions, you'll be able to get that. This is what you want to take if you're going into maybe a PvE fight, has a lot of conditions like Greer, or if you're fighting maybe a conditioned Conduit in competitive modes, you can take this. Its strain bonus is going to be the Replicating Strain. It's going to give you a heal over time and alacrity, kind of more sustained healing bonuses when you use that as opposed to the more immediate defensive bonuses from Protect. Good note on this skill is it's also a stun break. You're losing some of your tool belts, and a lot of the good ones are stun breaks. We wanted to make sure you had the options to take stun breaks with part of these more skills. And that can kind of open up even more normal utility options, because sometimes on Engineer you were kind of constrained of what you could take because you need some stun breaks. But now you can maybe take utility skills that don't have a stun break tool belt because you can get it here by selecting these specific more skills. The next one is going to be the last defensive one, Defensive Protocol Thorns. It's also going to be a stun break. This one is more dubiously labeled a defense. It is pretty offensive in what it does. It gives you a buff that's similar to, people might remember a long time ago, there was a boon called Retaliation. It did damage to people when they hit you. This one is going to be a pretty similar effect. The thorns are going to kind of react and strike when you're struck, dealing damage to enemies nearby you. Pretty important to note that this does have a melee range requirement. So if there's ranger rapid firing you from far away, you're not going to deal any damage to them. But if you're in the thick of it, maybe in a World v World situation, getting hit a lot, this one's going to pump out a lot of damage.
Notably, there is kind of a limit to how often it will retaliate, correct?
Yes. There is a small interval, so you can't do infinite damage if you're getting hit a lot, but it still does have strong damaging capabilities. Its strain bonus is going to be the Rapacious Strain. This is similar effect to some other buffs we have in the game. When you strike foes, you're going to strike them additional time. So it's kind of like One Wolf Pack, Shattering Ice on Catalyst we have, just generating some extra damage. So this one's really, if you want a defense, a stun break, but you don't want a full defense, still want to be offensive aggressive, maybe in PvE situations, this one's a pretty good pickup for that. But then we can move into the more offensive ones. The first one is going to be Offensive Protocol Pierce. You're going to create a spike and then jab out with it, stunning enemies. Big note on this one is that it is unblockable. It has a really high wind-up time, so it's pretty easy to see coming, but if an enemy is shield blocking right in front of you and you've decided to take this skill, it can be a pretty good counter to that. Just very offensively minded. It is loaded with CC. Its strain bonus is going to be when you evolve, you're going to stun nearby enemies after a delay. So if Cal evolves with it on, you'll see that there's a little white circle, and after a delay, another bang, it's going to stun people. So, if you want to do some break bar damage in PvE, this is the one you slot on. Get a lot of combo potential as well in competitive modes. CC someone, use some other of the offense we're going to get into. A lot of potential here. Then the next one is going to be Offensive Protocol Obliterate. This is probably like the most offensive one you have. It's going to swing a giant sword. I think my direction to the artist was like, make this sword cartoonishly large. You can see a really cool streak on it. But it's going to deal a lot of damage, deal a lot of bleeding, and it has a special mechanic that I don't think we've done before, and that is going to break your enemy's barrier. So that's like all of it. So if you're up against like maybe Ceres in PvE that has a lot of barrier built up on it, or against a Scourge in competitive mode, you can use a skill and break their barrier before you deal the damage. So specifically really good if you know you're going to fight someone who has barrier access, but also just does a ton of damage. Its strain bonus is going to be Titanic Strain. Evolving gives you might and also increases the effectiveness of might. So it's going to be like 10 might stacks and also make that might even better. So if you have 25 anyways in PvE, it's still going to juice you. Pretty good damage increase, like I said. If you're looking for damage, it's going to be the one with the most throughput there.
I think you should make the sword even larger.
I agree. It already is like cartoonish. Like I think when you're like a Norn, like it scales like most things do to races, and it's like incredibly big there. So the next one is going to be Offensive Protocol Shred. This one, you're going to throw out 3 discs, you saw this in the video, that are going to cripple enemies, and if you hit all 3 of them, it's going to apply and immobilize. This one's kind of a gap closer. The spec isn't going to be as fast as Scrapper with its super speed or Hollowsmith with like Photon Forge 2. So this is a good, like if you want to make sure you're chasing enemies, this is a skill to take. To go along with that, its upgrade bonus is going to be the Predator Strain, just giving you quickness and super speed when you evolve. 2 pretty good bonuses to chase people down and deal some damage pretty fast. Then the last morph skill we have access to is going to be Offensive Protocol Demolish. This one you're going to swing a hammer around, and then at the end you're going to smash it down. Again, we saw this in the video. This one is really focused around doing heavy AoE damage. So if you're trying to cleave a lot of mobs, if you're in World v World, you want to do a lot of damage to the group in front of you, this is a skill you take. To go along with that, when you're in the cut of things, it can be kind of dangerous. So the Berserker Strain is going to give you stability and also heal from outgoing damage. So while you're doing that, you're healing yourself, staying up, making sure you don't die while you're in the middle of things. The spec is, pretty much a bruiser spec. There's going to be a lot of defenses baked in and a lot of ways to deal damage, especially from melee range. So everything's trying to synergize around that. And then, with all of those in mind, you can see why Evolve is a pretty powerful button. Getting 3 of those bonuses we just went over whenever you want, customizing it for the situation, makes it a pretty good cooldown to have. It's really like a go time button. You're going to press that and people are going to be scared. But that kind of covers the general way you're going to play with profession mechanics. We can move into the utilities, which are going to be stances. Important to hydrate. But the heal is going to be mitotic state. You're going to command your cells to separate, regenerate. It's going to heal you over time pretty rapidly when you use it. And then it's got a little hook that is going to increase its effectiveness while you have barrier. As Cal's been pressing the skills, you can see that you're getting some barrier when you get more skills, so it's pretty easy to trigger that. We'll get into that when we talk about the traits. But this one, it's not going to give you like a burst heal like you normally do. It's going to be a heal over time. And so it's kind of vulnerable to pressure. If people are hitting you while it's healing, they're going to break your barrier pretty fast. So you're going to lose out on that. You might not get the, direct healing that you might get from like an AED or like the normal elixir heal. But it is a pretty strong heal over time. So really good sustain benefit. But then talk about the heal. We can talk about this healed tool belt as it's going to have one because you don't get a morph in that slot. It's going to be symbiotic shielding. It's going to be instant cast, give you barrier mag aura. Pretty good defensive cooldown, get that barrier to trigger the healing. Magnetic aura, as we talked about, not a lot of range or mobility in the kit, and so having that little counter pressure to use just instantly is a pretty good thing to have in the kit. Then we can go on to the just normal utilities. There's going to be 4 of them based on the states of matter. You saw liquid state in the video, and it's like super cool, but there are also other ones. The first one we're going to talk about is Solid State. That one is going to be a CC ability. You're going to leap up in the air, harden yourself, give yourself some stability, and then you're going to crash down, stunning enemies. Then you're going to get a buff for a little bit that increases outgoing stun duration. So this pairs pretty well with Pierce we talked about. If you have Throw Mine, if you have Hammer on, just if you need to do break bar damage, start with this and then throw all your things out. In competitive modes, getting stability and stunning people, pretty strong thing to have. Really good initiation tool. Then next one, we can talk about Liquid State. You're going to melt down into a puddle. Most importantly, you can move while being a puddle. And then while you're in that state, you're going to deal damage around you, kind of ticking damage and poisoning people that stand on top of you, crippling them, making sure they don't have much mobility. But this one's going to be kind of a short defensive cooldown mostly. You're going to evade while you're under there. So it's going to be a shorter duration than something like Elixir S, but it's also going to have a lower cooldown, be a bit more usable, and also can keep up some pressure while you're, ticking poison onto people that stand on top of you. Then the next one is going to be Gaseous State. You will sublimate, vocab word, breaking stuns, and then you're also going to remove movement impairing conditions and prevent their reapplication, because you're kind of like in a gassy, airy state, so how can people immobilize you? You're not going to be completely incorporeal, like maybe mist form, but you are going to be a bit hard to hit, so this has a little bit of a new mechanic where incoming strikes against you are going to be glancing blows. So it's basically like as if anyone that hit you had a weakness on them. So can't be crit, really good damage reduction tool. Not completely invulnerable, you can still be CC'd during this, but again, pretty good defensive cooldown. Then the last one is going to be Plasmatic State. This one is going to be the most offensive option you have. You're going to strike out twice, giving yourself a pretty good damage buff, and also doing heavy damage from the strikes themselves. This is a pretty high modifier, so usually you want to stack it, you want to evolve, and then use this, stack all your damage multipliers. I think in PvE, the spec is going to have a more bursty damage profile, where you're going to want to save your cooldowns for when you have evolve up, and stack all of them at once, get a really high damage burst off. So managing those cooldowns is going to be kind of important. And then competitive modes, this one is going to be, if you want just more damage from the kit, this is a pretty good button to have. Then lastly, we can talk about the elite. It's going to be Flux State. You're going to kind of command your slime to swirl around you, creating a magnetic field. You're going to initially pull people in and then create like a storm of those like spiky metal things you see going on that's going to take damage and apply bleeding. So pretty good control thing to start with, and then as you pull enemies in, there's going to be a storm that damages around you. So pretty simple elite skill. Again, pretty good to have up when you're bursting things. Simple what you want out of the slot. That kind of covers all the utilities, so we can move into the traits here quickly. Yep, the first one is going to be Experimental Union, explains what the spec does. That's, can move on to the first interesting one, is going to be Hybrid Vigor. You're going to gain Vitality, and then this is where the barrier is coming from as Cal is pressing the skills. When you gain Barrier, when you use a Morph skill. This one's kind of built-in Sustain, kind of the heat therapy equivalent of this spec. Doesn't give Vigor, so maybe it's like an unplayable thing, but Hybrid Vigor is like a biology term, so get educated, I guess. Then we can move to the next minor, is Willing Host. This one, when you use a Morph skill, you're going to get yourself a damage increase. Again, kind of like the baked-in damage increase for the spec. This buff, when you use it, it's not going to stack duration, it's going to reset duration. So it's a bit of an incentive to spread out your cooldowns to make sure you always have this buff up. You don't want to maybe slam all your Morph skills at once and then run out of the damage bonus. You want to make sure you have spread them out so you can, make sure that buff is always on you, getting the most value out of it. Then going to the Adept tier, this tier is kind of a theme. They're all going to be defensive. None of them are going to give you a damage bonus, but it's going to be how do you want to pick that defense. The first one, Stainless Steel, is going to be oriented more towards conditions. When you use one of the stance skills or evolve, you're going to convert conditions into boons. So if you're going into a place where you would want that cleanse morph against, again, Greer, any Condi boss, or in competitive modes, this one is probably the one you want to pick. The one below it, it's going to be Innervating Alloy, heal every second while you have Barrier, heal when you evolve. So this has pretty good innate synergy with that Hybrid Vigor trait we talked about. This one is not going to provide you an active defense, but it is going to give you sustain over time. So if you can't really decide if you want the top or the bottom, this one's a good middle ground to have, always useful. The bottom one is going to be protection against kind of burst damage, that strike damage, hardened chrome, more skills and evolve, grant protection to yourself. So it can potentially be a lot of little triggers of protection. So it's good with that Inventions trait, anti-corrosion plating, get a lot of triggers off of that. But if you're up against heavy strike damage, this is a trait that's probably going to give you a lot of value compared to the other two. Then, you know, the interesting level of these traits is going to increase if we go with the tiers. The Master trait going to be a bit more interesting. Grandmaster is pretty spicy, so just tease you with that as you talk about the Master tier. The first one is going to be Carbolic Composition. This one is going to focus on poison application. It's going to cause all your amalgam skills, which are just any skill that's special to the amalgam, all the morph skills, all the utilities on hit, they're going to apply poison. And then you're also going to get a pretty big duration increase for poison. Engineer has pretty big duration increases for both bleeding and burning in the firearms trait line, but poison was kind of not there. So this hopefully make it easier to condition duration cap, specifically with some condition builds, and also be a more biological focus on applying poison and just getting some extra damage, enabling some condition amalgam builds here. The middle one is going to be Mercurial Tendencies. Disabling an enemy reduces the cooldown of Evolve. This is a pretty powerful effect if you can get a lot of CCs in your build. This one is specifically going to give a lot of synergy towards hammers, I think. You know, if you're a Juggernaut owner, you want to use it with this spec. And hammer can get a lot of CC procs off. So again, using that, you get Evolve off cooldown more, can mold your rotations based on getting those CCs matched up a bit better with Plasmatic State damage bonus. Should be pretty interesting. Something you definitely want to be capitalizing around on a damage amalgam build. And then the last one is going to be Silver Lining. It's gonna do what it says. There's gonna be a bit of a downside, but a pretty good upside. Evolving no longer inherits the bonus of strains. So it makes so all you do when you evolve is get that stat bonus, but instead more skills are gonna grant their strain bonuses at a reduced duration. So this one shouldn't give you a lot more uptime on those bonuses, but a lot more flexibility of when you use them. So if you do that hammer spin, as Cal's doing with it, you're going to get stability at the start. It's a pretty good time to get stability is when you're doing that long cast, and also that healing buff. So you're going to have it when you use Obliterate, get that damage bonus when you want it. So yeah, like I said, just a bit more flexibility. Might be better in competitive modes where it's risky to get all those bonuses all at once, but this is more spread out, but again, lower duration. You might be thinking with this trait that like, okay, Evolve kind of sucks if I take this trait, but we haven't gone to the Grandmasters there. So all the Grandmasters are going to kind of change what Evolve does a bit and make it to the button that's already interesting is like super interesting. So talk about them. We go to Symbiotic Synergy, the top trait, which has the best trait icon in the game. It's just a little ooze guy that's smiling. But what it's going to do is it's going to cause Evolve to recharge your more skills, and then more skills deal increased strike damage. So recharging all three of those abilities is pretty strong. Getting all that damage back can get your block back, stun breaks back when you evolve. Makes it a pretty good cooldown to have. Pretty big strike modifier for PvE. All these traits, everything you're seeing on the stream is like kind of split for competitive modes. You're seeing the PvE balance. But again, making that cooldown, kind of want to use all your more skills, then evolve, and then have them all back for that moment of power. Pretty strong moment. And then I think all the other Grandmasters are going to be strong as well, compete with that. We can skip to the bottom to talk about Double Helix. Evolve is going to grant an additional charge and grant a bonus to its increased stats. So this one is going to give you double the evolves, which is pretty good, and make it a bit stronger, getting that stat bonus to 15%. And having two charges means that you can kind of choose when you want to evolve. Again, when we talked about Silver Lining, some of these bonuses are things you want to time specifically. So just having that extra charge and knowing you can use one of them off cooldown, but always having another one when you want that stability, that resistance, anything that you want, that quickness, super speed on demand can be pretty powerful. This trait has a lot more burst potential. You can use two evolves back to back to get some really high bonuses, where I expect maybe Symbiotic Synergy is a more sustained damage option. But then there's one last Grandmaster trait, and this one is potentially the most interesting. It's going to be Contagious Mutation. Strain enhancement effects are shared to nearby allies when activated with a reduced duration. So that's all the effects we just talked about. You give your allies the resistance, the quickness, the super speed, even the special ones. You can give them that strike bonus from Rapacious Strain. You can give them increased might effectiveness. They're going to take a duration decrease. You're sacrificing a lot to take this trait. You're not going to get like the cooldown reduction from Evolve. You're not going to get the double charges. But if you're in a group situation, this is probably a really good trait to have. A lot of potential, a lot of things that this could just be broken. That's what betas are for. So very excited and interesting to see what people do with this trait. Gotta keep our eye on it for sure. It does work with Silver Lining. So if you have both Contagious Mutation and Silver Lining, you're going to share to allies when you use those morph skills. So just even more choosing when to give things. They are going to stack the duration bonuses. So I think it's like only 3 seconds you share to allies, but still pretty powerful application. You do have the ability to grant both quickness and alacrity if you take both of those, but you have to make a lot of sacrifices to do that, so potentially fine, we will see. But yeah, that is the Amalgam. Pretty good.
The Amalgam. What's your favorite morph skill?
I think Obliterate, like the sword is just so good, and just like cranking with it, like it hits really hard. So you should dodge that if you see it coming.
All right, that means we have covered all the elite specs. There's nothing more to see here today. Although I guess we can talk about the Evoker.
Before we get into the Evoker, I think there's one question on everyone's mind, Cal, and of the familiars you get, which one is your favorite?
Which one is my favorite? I really like the hair, I think. They're all so good, though. It's like, we'll show them all off as we get in here. Let's see, just make sure everything's set up properly. Put on some skills. All right, let's do it. Evoker, the last elite spec preview before we get into the beta. So we talked about this a lot in the blog. You know, you probably watched a video. So first things first, you pick an element to specialize in. You do that on the F5 slot here. Similar mechanic to how the Amalgam skills work, where it is kind of selectable profession skill. And here we can choose from, you know, the fox or the otter or the hare or the toad. Let's just give them the time that they deserve here on the screen. So here's the fiery fox, of course. Water otter. The air hare. And of course the earth toad. So the idea here is that you pick an element to specialize in, and this is going to do a few things. First of all, there will be some traits and utility skills that care about your specialized element. We'll get to those in a little bit. They're also going to see a significantly reduced recharge time of the element you specialize in. So here I am specialized in fire. So when I swap out of fire, you're going to see it goes on the short recharge time that all of the other attunements go on. This is a number that we're definitely playing around with, trying to find like the right balance between this really feels like you have more flexibility. Like obviously people know fresh air, the trait just gives you a lot more flexibility in how you use your air skills, when you need to use your air skills, because you can kind of always go back. Similar idea here. There are a number of traits, obviously, that trigger when you enter an attunement. Some of these are balanced for the Weaver profession in that they cannot trigger when you attune to the same element. And those traits specifically will have a internal cooldown when you have the specialized element. So if I have, for example, Healing Ripple is the example in the water trait line, the one that says heal when you swap to water. That will not be able to trigger every single time if you are quickly swapping in and out of water, because it might be a little bit too powerful, but it will still have more, there will be increased access to that because you can just wait a little bit longer, or, you know, it's going to be every other time that you swap into water, or every third time, depending on how quickly you are swapping. Keeping a pretty close eye on how that plays. You know, is this short recharge the right number? It fit pretty well with just how attunement mechanics work already, so that was kind of the baseline. but it could be a little bit longer. Maybe the traits don't need internal cooldowns then, but that's something we'll be looking for a lot of feedback on during the beta. But for now, it is just your specialized element will always have this low recharge time. And that, again, just gives you a lot of extra flexibility. I think Dagger with Air is a great example of this, where Shocking Aura, Ride the Lightning, Updraft, these are all skills that are pretty situational. So if you swap out of Air and then you don't have access to those for like 10 seconds or 8 seconds or whatever your attunement recharge is and how much alacrity you have, there's so many variables that go in, but you have that longer window of opportunity for like enemies to capitalize on, I know there's no Shocking Aura available, but now you can have a much lower recharge and always be able to go back to those utility focused skills, or always go back to the auto attack that you like the most as you use the other skills in your build. So last up we have the familiar. Obviously we get a familiar when we specialize in an element, and the way that this works is it's obviously not like a ranger pet or a mechanist mech. It is intended to be more of like a companion combatant, where we're really trying to capture the feeling of this familiar kind of fighting alongside of you. So the way that it works is using a weapon skill is going to start charging up this meter. And we talked about this a lot in the blog too. Here I used an air skill with my Firefox, so it gave me 1 charge. But if I go back to fire attunement and I use a fire skill, that's going to give me 2 charges toward my, we're calling it the basic skill. We see another note here about an empowered skill. We'll get to that pretty soon. But the idea is, again, you can charge up your familiar skill more quickly, and then that will, as you're fighting, build up your familiar's power. It can contribute a attack as well. So you can see a nice little fireball. We'll talk exactly about these skills. There's still a little bit more to explain about how this charging mechanic works. Currently, for the beta, it will not charge up when you're using an auto attack, and it will not charge when you use a flip skill. And the goal here is that trying to normalize the rate gain across different weapons a bit better. Obviously, comparing something like Scepter to something like Staff with Fire, the auto attack speed is significantly different. So it would blow out pretty heavily if you got 2 from using an auto attack. It could use 1. This is still something that we're thinking about a lot. Whether or not there should be charge from using utility skills, whether it should be charged at a reduced charge for auto attacks, maybe even give like half of a charge, for example. So we'll definitely be looking for feedback on this in the beta. But for the baseline, the first implementation is that as you use basically your 2 through 5 skills, that is going to contribute charge to your familiar's basic attack. So you will be using your skills, and then the familiar will power up here, and we're going to see firing up Ignite here. From the Firefox. This is just shooting out a burning projectile, and the idea is that each time you strike the same enemy in quick succession, it's a pretty generous window, so quick is kind of a misnomer. I think it's like a 10-second window to hit the same target. That will inflict additional burning. So I'm just going to start cheating and have infinite energy here, infinite charge, and so we will kind of start from 0. It did not quite start from 0. But we see here that inflicting 1 burning, then 2 burning, then 3 burning on the 3rd hit. And after we use the basic skill 3 times, so I hope you guys like counting to 3, because you can count to 3 in your fire attunement and then count to 3 as you use the basic skill to the empowered skill. And that will then unlock the empowered skill of the familiar. The idea is that you can then conjure it into the world and it will perform a much more powerful attack. So here we see Conflagration, kind of the ultimate skill of the Firefox, is that it will spawn into the world, attack your targeted enemy, inflicting burning, and this will then also spread burning on that target to nearby enemies. So kind of an epidemic effect, but only for burning. So we see here, build up that burning on this target, then we're going to hit with Conflagration. That's going to get a pretty big burn spread, assuming you hit everything. And then the idea here is that there is a cap on how much burning you can do. We thought that applying 1,500 stacks of burning might be too much. So here we see the maximum stack count is 9. It's going to be a little bit lower in competitive modes as well. And there's, again, just another thing that we're keeping a pretty close eye on. Like, we want the skill to feel really strong. Transferring 9 stacks or copying 9 stacks of burning to nearby enemies is pretty strong. But, maybe it could be a little bit higher. We'll see as we get further into the beta. And then once you have used the empowered skill, we see the center meter reset back to 0, and the familiar will kind of come back to its floaty hover state. So notably, the familiar will just follow you around in this state. It'll just, float, chasing you around the world, but companion for your adventures. Importantly, when you activate the basic skill, the familiar will find you wherever you are, just to make sure that it's in the right position. It will kind of teleport over to you and make sure that, this is firing off a projectile with a certain range. We want to make sure that it is based pretty closely to your range, and we'll see this on a number of other skills as well, but the familiar will always come to your location. Notably, if you do get really far away, the familiar didn't get far enough away, but if you get far enough away, it will eventually just teleport to you again. Kind of a nice catch-up mechanic here, similar to how a lot of pets work as well. But most importantly, this is not a ranger pet, it's not a mechanist mech, it's not something that is attackable or in the world. It is a familiar, ally combatant that is powered up through your own weapon skills. So that is the Firefox. We saw Ignite and Conflagration. So let's go ahead and move into the Water Otter next. Notably, we will see quite a bit of flexibility on this spec. I'd argue that it rivals Amalgam, if not overtakes it, with the amount of flexibility in this profession based off which element you choose to specialize in. Obviously, we're going to see a lot more condition damage from fire. We'll see a lot of heals and supportive stuff from water, strike damage, power damage coming out from the air, hair, and more of that bulky bruiser type playstyle from the earth toad. Let's go ahead and move into the otter. So basic skill here, we're just going to have Splash. This is going to throw out a few healing projectiles nearby allies. That's a little bit of healing, a little bit of regeneration there. Nothing too crazy, but just a nice solid healing skill. Then once we build up to that empowered skill, we're going to see Buoyant Deluge. This is a pretty powerful skill, does a lot of things. So we see here that we're going to let's take a look at what the otter actually does here. It's a ground target skill. I'll pick the area. Let's throw it on our allies when we want to heal them. See the otter kind of come in, play around with a little bit of water stuff, and then fire off a big ball of healing water. Mostly healing water, but it does also have some offensive components here. This skill's really fun. I love the animation of this skill so much. But we see here that this is going to heal these allies, create a water field. This is going to pulse some regeneration as well, very powerful with something like Cleansing Water. And then also remove some conditions. And then the extra bonus here is when you throw it on enemies. Generally, you're going to be throwing it on allies to heal them, but if you also have overlapping enemies, we're going to see that bubble kind of traps those enemies inside, doing a stun. So a really powerful skill, does quite a few things. A lot of these empowered skills, they are a little bit less accessible when you are not given infinite charge. So they are going to be all super impactful, very powerful skills. Just give some more screen time to the otter. Got a nice little shell necklace. Next up, we have the air hare. This one's going to be, again, more strike damage focused, starting off with the zap. It's just going to be a ground target damage skill. See some damage. We see this mark being applied. The way that this works is that it will mark enemies to take increased damage from your critical strikes. It won't augment ally critical strikes, but your own critical strikes will get a nice little damage bonus here. So you will be wanting to continuously zap your enemies in order to keep that up, or it will rather create some more bursty windows of opportunity. And we really need a close-up on this animation as well. We see the hare doing a little bit of spell casting, does a little backflip to fire off that burst of lightning. And that eventually is going to flip over into Lightning Blitz. This is going to be just a big strike damage skill. The idea is that the hare, you summon the hare and it kind of dashes so quickly between your enemies to the point that it might actually be teleporting. But that is just going to be doing guaranteed critical damage on every strike, so that plays really nicely into the zap debuff, obviously, but this will kind of dash between enemies. If there is only a single enemy, we will of course see the hair continue to strike that single enemy and kind of power up, doing a bunch of strikes, bunch of damage, and then again coming back to the baseline of floating next to you. Some big damage coming out from, assuming you have real equipment equipped that has power, precision, and ferocity. I guess you don't need precision for that skill, but I would recommend a lot of power and ferocity instead of nothing. And last but not least, we have the Earth Toad. Again, leaning more into like this bruisery defensive playstyle, a little bit of crowd control, or a lot of crowd control, as we'll see. I'll take a quick water break though as we watch the marvel that is the Earth Toad. All right, so we're going to start off with Calcify. And the idea here is that it's just going to be a quick casting interrupt, short-ish days. Obviously, again, the Toad will teleport on top of you to make sure that it is hitting those nearby enemies. If you do strike an enemy that is using a skill, this is also going to give you a bit of barrier. So a nice little defensive tool. A little bit of strike damage on this, but the main focus is, again, that crowd control and that defensive component as well. Look at this up a few more times. Earth Toad doing some magic, firing out some rocks. And that is going to flip over into Seismic Impact. This is going to be that big crowd control moment. We're going to see the Toad comes in, kind of stomps on the ground. The first hit here is going to knock down enemies, all going to create this ring of earth, similar to like the ring of warding mechanics that we've seen in a few places where enemies cannot cross through unless they do have stability, but it is kind of that earthen cage to keep enemies trapped inside. And then we did see a bit of damage, bleeding, cripple, coming out on the second stomp there as well. So just that pretty solid bruiser skill. We see that this area is also going to give protection to nearby allies, including yourself. So again, big crowd control, a little bit of damage, and a nice little defensive skill is, again, the theme of the Earth Toad. Let's see it one more time. Seismic Impact. And the Toad will come back to following you around. So that's the gist of the familiar mechanic. Obviously, like I said, we're still looking for a lot of feedback around like charge rates and skill impact levels. And there's a lot of ways that we can tune this mechanic, as we talked about already. It's like, should auto attacks count? Should utility skills count? Should flip skills count? Should it be faster? Should it be slower? The beta is going to give us a lot of this information, and all you guys feedback in the chat and the beta, playing the beta is going to give us kind of the right balance of these things, such that it feels like this is a fairly active companion fighting alongside you. So next up, we can hop into the utility skills. We'll start with the healing skill with this lovely image of the otter getting a pat on its head. Rejuvenate. So this is just going to be a pretty short cooldown healing skill. Nothing too crazy. It's going to heal you, and it is going to give you a full charge of your familiar basic skill. So this will just kind of accelerate your building toward that empower skill just a little bit, in addition to obviously giving you that healing skill. Nothing too crazy, but some nice visuals. This one doesn't really care what your familiar is. The elite skill doesn't care what your familiar is either, but now we'll take a look at these utility skills that do have a slight amount of caring about what your utility skill or what your specialized element is. I'm going to swap back to the Fox because the first thing we're going to talk about is Fox's Fury. This is going to give some defense, or some offensive boons rather. Still, my mind was stuck in the Toad land of defense, but here we are with Fox's Fury. This is going to give some might, some fury to your nearby allies, and then you're going to attack an enemy, do some damage, and do some burning. And the damage and burning here is going to scale based off how many might stacks you have. So we have a few different thresholds here. If you have less than 10 might, you're going to get kind of the weakest version of the skill. And between 10 and 20 might, you get the middle version of the skill. And then if you want the big damage, the big burning, you're going to want to have 25 might stacks, as you probably do as you're running around in raids or open world PvE or anything like that. Notably, the might from this skill will count first. It's not going to be enough on its own to get you over that first threshold, but if you just have a couple of might stacks lying around, you can always at least get the middle value of the skill. And assuming you have, say, 12 might, 13 might is over 20 might, then you can get the full value of the skill as you fire it off. And for anyone reading the skill fact as I'm rambling here, we see that if fire is the specialized element, this skill will be the stun break. That's kind of the baseline mechanic that we've implemented for all of the utility skills here. Your specialized element will control which of these skills is your stun break. We think that there still needs to be a little bit more here. Didn't quite get in for the beta, but there is going to likely be, we're already kind of looking ahead toward making the specialized element kind of pump up these skills even a bit more than just having that stun break component. So keep that in mind as you are giving feedback around these skills. And if there's anything that you have in mind, it should just be more damage, more burning. Maybe that makes sense for this one. Maybe it should do something else. Maybe it could give you more might stacks so you hit that second threshold, third threshold a bit easier. That is something that we are considering moving forward. It's just for the beta, the specialized element will make the associated utility skill into a stun break. So next up, we'll take a look at the Otter's Compassion. Notably, these are meditations. Forgot to mention that, but anyone who can read the skill facts will know that kind of fits the theme pretty well. Like, the spirits of the wild, and you're kind of communing with these elemental familiars. Meditation fits pretty well. And, there's at least one relic that cares about meditations. So maybe you take that, get a little bit of extra protection. Here we see Otter's Compassion. Again, this will be the stun break if you have the Otter. Only for yourself, not for allies. But the way this skill works is that it will convert conditions on yourself and nearby allies, specifically into regeneration. That is important once we get into the traits. Obviously, maybe Cleansing Water exists as well. So you can remove 5 conditions, gain 5 stacks of regen, which obviously stacks in duration, but it will give you 5 instances of regen, which could then trigger Cleansing Water 5 more times. And that's kind of insane when you think about it. It could be a Cleanse 10. But just a powerful, defensive Conduit removal, a little bit of healing from that regen, but a, pretty straightforward water-associated skill. Show that. There's a little burst of water energy coming out here as you remove conditions from your allies. Next up, it doesn't really matter that I specialize, because we're not showing off the stun break component. It is there, but we do like to have the hair here because the hair, again, is the best of the familiars, and there is no argument for any of the other 3, except they're all good. Hair's agility. This is going to be a ground target, mobility skill, evasion, dash. You see, pretty good distance, not super long range, but reasonable amount that you can kind of escape. It's going to be evading attacks, and it's also going to give you stacks of this venom-esque buff called Hair's Agility, named after the skill. This is going to cause your next attacks to inflict chain lightning. Let me see here, just getting a little bit extra of that damage from the chain lightning strikes being generated from this buff. We'll see this buff again when we get into the traits, but it is again going to be a pretty decent chunk of damage coming out, so kind of a hybrid defensive and offensive skill here. Nice little lightning effects. You're not quite as fast as the hair, you don't get to teleport across the entire map, but you can evade attacks as you dash and get that buff. Again, this will be a stun break if you have the hair. Last up we have Toad's Fortitude. This is going to be more of that defensive skill again, but it will have some offensive components. We see some bleeding on there, we see protection, we see a bit of damage as well. This is going to be a short duration block, so you're going to want to use this at the right time, block the key attacks, and then this will explode outward, this kind of earthen barrier, explode outward, do some damage, do some bleeding, and also grants you protection, assuming you aren't interrupted by some sort of unblockable crowd control. And then, of course, if you do have the earthen specialized element, this will be a stun break. And last up, we have the elite skill. So what could it do? You might get a hint from the icon. The idea is that this will kind of give you access to all of the familiars, and you guys might have noticed this in the teaser video that was kind of used at the end of the Evoker segment. You could kind of see the familiars starting to come together. The idea is you ground target the skill, then the familiars will all kind of do their attack around that area. Obviously, there were no enemies there, so Fox and Hare didn't show themselves, but let's use it on some actual enemies. Toad will come in first, set up with that earthen cage. Then the Otter's going to toss that water ball on top, get that stun. Fox and Hare will come in, and they're set up to hit all their damage, so that's what they're going to do. Obviously, you get the healing from this. You get the protection from this, potentially. You get all the things from this. It's an elite skill. It does it all. And just a really powerful effect, where it also gives you access to kind of all of these familiars that you wouldn't otherwise have access to. So a very... I don't know what word I'm looking for. This gives you a lot of different types of value all at the same time. So you can use this on your allies, giving that healing from the water ball, giving that protection from the earth toad, but maximum value is going to be somewhere where there are enemies and allies at the same spot. So again, these are just using all those empowered skills. We have Conflagration, we have Seismic Impact, we have Buoyant Deluge, and Lightning Blitz are all going to be triggered here as we get trolled by skill retargeting. But here we go, using it at the proper location. We see all the familiars coming in and doing their thing. Now, take a quick break for water, and we're going to talk about the traits. Taylor, what is your favorite of the familiars?
It's definitely the Toad. Really looking to do an Earth Evoker, put my hammer on, swing around. Very, very dirt, mud focused. Definitely the best one by far.
Yeah, I see how it is. All right, let's put on some random traits. Wait, flashing. Here we go. This explains all the things that we already explained. You can scroll through this one, see all the basic skills, see all the empowered skills, all that good stuff. But let's talk about traits that actually do something. So here's kind of the first of a handful of traits that care which element you are specialized in. This is Enhanced Potency. It's going to improve a boon based off that choice. So where we see Might giving you additional condition damage per stack, Regeneration going to have that increased healing. That is notably Regeneration will heal for more, not an outgoing healing bonus. Hare is going to give you that Super Fury, increased critical chance while you have Fury, and the Earth Toad will cause your protection to do reduced condition damage as well as strike damage. So again, it's kind of like a stat stick trait that just leans into defining which of these playstyles that you selected based off your element: Conduit damage, healing, strike damage, defense. Next up, we have Familiar's Prowess. That's spoiler from the top GM affecting this. We did see this activating or triggering every time that we used a familiar skill. This is just going to be, again, kind of more of that bread and butter, build-defining bonus effect. We see every time we use a familiar skill, whether it is that basic skill or the empowered skill, we will get a buff on our bar for a bit of time, increased condition damage, increased outgoing healing, increased strike damage, or reduced incoming strike damage, again, based off your familiar. We're going to move into the adept traits. So this is going to be kind of an air-focused trait. There's going to be 4 of these, 1 for each element. What a surprise! Where each of these care about your specialized element in that they will be a bit more powerful if you have the matching familiar. So here we see that every time we use a familiar skill, we're going to be getting stacks of that Chain Lightning buff that we saw on the utility skill as well. So that's going to be a single stack, also going to give some Fury in there, but if you have the Hare, you're going to get 2 stacks of this buff, so basically double effectiveness of this Chain Lightning buff. Can move into the bottom trait, which is going to be more of that earth focused trait, earth and fortification, gain protection when you disable an enemy, and again, basically double effectiveness here if you are channeling or if you are evoking the toad. And then in the center, so we'll see the fire and water traits in the master tier. Then in the center, we're going to see kind of a hybrid trait that is valuable to both the other two elements. So here we see blazing restoration when you use a healing skill, that lower cooldown evoker healing skill. We're going to do a bit of regen AoE and a bit of burning AoE. This will be important for either of those two traits that we will see basically right now. Starting with Fiery Might, this is going to be increased burn damage. So again, leaning into that. Condition damaged, a lot of burning going to be coming out from the fire specialized evokers. And then you're also going to gain might anytime that you inflict burning with a very short cooldown to make sure that it's not completely insane. But as we see here, that might duration is going to be basically doubled when you have the fox, so just giving more opportunity to stack up that might.
Very important note here that both this trait and the Familiar's Prowess bonus should work with Inferno, correct?
I believe that is correct. If it's not, I'll go double check after this trade, but we'll make sure that it does.
The Familiar's Prowess bonus says plus 10% condition damage, but that is like damage from conditions. So even when you have Inferno, it is still a condition despite scaling with power. So you will have increased damage on it.
That is a good note, because Inferno, we might see some Infernos with the fox. Next up, we have the water trait, Soothing Evasion. This is again going to be more of that healing focus trait. Grant regen to allies on dodge, and then when you grant allies regeneration, you're going to be healing them. We can see here that healing is a bit more potent when you have the otter. Yet another trait that potentially heals on dodge roll because you will dodge, grant regeneration, then that regeneration will heal your allies. And then last up, the kind of hybrid air-earth trait in the center here, Elemental Balance. This is going to give you either increased outgoing strike damage or reduced incoming strike damage, depending on your health threshold. So when you are above that 50% threshold, taking the opportunity to go more aggressive, getting that increased damage. And as you're below that health threshold, it will instead, the toad will be protecting you with that reduced incoming strike damage. Quick water break before we wrap things up with the last 3 Grandmaster traits of these Elite Specialization previews. All right, we're going to start off with Familiar's Focus. So this is going to be, as we saw, this is really going to be enhancing that Familiar's Prowess bonus to even more powerful levels. It also has this personal heal attached, so it is more like this more selfish combination of like defense and offense trait. So every time that you use a familiar skill, you will get a bit of healing in addition to that empowered Familiar's Prowess. So we see here Fox's prowess, familiar prowess, even more condition damage. I mean, it's just increases of everything, except the toad again is going to give you kind of that hybrid Conduit damage reduction and strike damage reduction instead of going a bit too crazy with the strike damage reduction number. And then the rest are just pretty solid increases. This one's pretty straightforward. You know, if you do want that kind of lower impact, lower intensity style of build, you're probably going to want to play with Familiar's Prowess, as it is just leaning into the core mechanic of the Elite Specialization, using that familiar skill as often as you can. Next up, we have Familiar's Blessing. So this is going to be more of a supportive trait. We do see some boons here. This is always going to remove conditions from nearby allies when you use a familiar skill. And then, depending on your specialized element, we see a few different boons here. Might from the fox, earth can give you protection, and then there is opportunity to apply either quickness or alacrity, whether you have the hare or the otter equipped. So we will likely see, you know, that strike, that power, quickness, DPS with the air hare, and more of a heal alacrity build coming out from the water otter. Obviously, this can just be a powerful defensive tool in competitive modes as well, or a powerful support tool, giving that Conduit lens every time they use a familiar skill, or, you know, giving some of these defensive boons, or even quickness can be a pretty powerful damage spike. And there's one final trait to talk about. It might be the craziest trait of all of them.
I think so. I think out of all the things we've shown, it is the most interesting, most ambitious.
Across all of these elite specs, maybe across all existing elite specs, could it be the craziest trait? I want to say yes, and let's just see what it does as I equip the trait and take a drink of water. So we see here that I am specialized in fire, as I have the Firefox. And the first thing that this trait did, called Specialized Elements, is it said, hey, why aren't you in Fire Attunement? You should probably be in Fire Attunement. The way this trait works is you cannot leave your selected attunement, but there is some bonuses. There's reasons to do this. Are they good enough? We kind of hope so. You know, we do want to have this kind of single element playstyle enabled by this Grandmaster trait. That's a little bit crazy. And we didn't want it to be like something that you had to do playing with this specialization. But if you want to opt into this as the Grandmaster trait slot, you know, you can just be locked into Fire Attunement. All of my attunements have become Fire Attunement. I can't switch out. That's not the worst thing in the world, because we see here that the familiar basic skill is going to charge more quickly now. It's only going to take 2 of these skills. I can fire off a couple skills. That's going to give me access to Ignite, and I can fire off a couple more skills, get access to Ignite again, flip over to Conflagration, and when I activate Conflagration, use it at a pretty bad time, but this is going to give you a flat cooldown reduction to all of your equipped weapon skills. So we see here, you know, let's fire off some skills, do this again, charging up toward that Conflagration, and we're going to hopefully set up a reasonable period of time where we can utilize this. We have all our skills on cooldown. Now we use Conflagration. Those are all reset. Now I can start counting again toward my next Conflagration, toward my next Ignites. And this is like a pretty powerful loop. It's not really going to be like an infinite loop, obviously, but it is going to just lean into that single attunement playstyle where you're just be charging up the familiar skill even more rapidly, recharging out skills every time you use that. And this is going to add, you know, this is a pretty interesting trait. I don't want to call it a flexible trait because it's kind of the opposite of flexible, but there's a lot of different ideas that you can play around with here. As you can play like Scepter with Firefox, or you can play Staff with the Water Otter. You know, I switched to the Otter and it says, hey, now you have to be in Water Attunement. You're not allowed to be in another attunement. Air Hair, you know, this is going to be that air specialized strike damage. You know, a lot of lightning strikes, a lot of blinding flashes, maybe more gales coming to the table. You could play with Scepter, you could play with Dagger, you could play with, you know, finding the right combination of specialized element and weapon combination. There's a lot of opportunity to play around with this, and I think we've been having a lot of fun. You can probably hear it even in my voice as I talk about this. Like, we've been having a lot of fun with this trait internally, and this is something that we want it to be good, and it might not quite be good enough yet. So play with it during the beta, let us know. We're going to be playing with it a lot during the beta as well and iterating on this trait, but we do really like the idea of promoting this like single element playstyle in kind of an opt-in situation. It makes a lot of sense for this specialization because you are already specializing in an element. So if you really want to lean into fire, you can now do that in the most extreme way possible by playing with specialized elements. Notably, one thing I did forget to mention, because I'm just rambling on and on about.
So excited.
Just too much excitement. But when you activate that empowered skill, it is going to get that cooldown reduction on your skills, but it's also going to trigger all the traits as if you enter that element. So that will be triggering your Sunspot here. That will be triggering, you know, Elemental Attunement if you have it, Healing Ripple if you're in water and specialized in water. So you don't completely lose access to those traits. You just get them whenever you fire off that familiar's empowered skill. So, you know, Taylor mentioned he's probably going to be playing around with the Earth Toad specialized elements, maybe as a hammer equipped, see what happens.
I think Dagger Earth is right now the best, you know, Earth specialized elements I can get, but, you know, there's I need the throughput. I need as many Toad skills as possible, and this is what that trait enables.
Yeah, so that's all we got. I think there's nothing else to talk about. We ended things on a crazy note. Let's just reiterate, it's a beta event. There's some crazy stuff. This is obviously a crazy trait. We've seen some other crazy traits. We've seen some other crazy profession mechanics, crazy skills all across everywhere, but they're all really interesting and they're all really fun. So play with them during the beta. Let us know what's working, what's not working, where does these things need to be stronger, weaker, so on and so forth. You know, I've said it so many times that it might just not mean anything to you guys anymore, but it is really important that there is a reason that we're running the beta event, and it is because we want to make these specializations the best versions of themselves before the expansion even launches. So you're getting that initial taste of not quite perfect, not quite final, but it's just going to give us so much more information, so much more data, so much more feedback around these specs that they're going to be so much better going into launch than if we just didn't run a beta event.
Yep. And the beta is August 20th. That's 12 days away, less than 2 weeks. So get excited. And a note on that, just a small thing, is that normally the PvP monthly automated tournament would fall under that beta window, but we really want you guys to focus on these beta elite specs. Don't have to worry about that. So we're pushing the monthly automated tournament back a week. There will be a post in the forums about that. Just an FYI. Right now we have the push beta going on. You can queue up in ranked, try out new push changes.
Yep. I think that's all we got, unless you have any final words on any of the specs. They're probably the ones we talked about today, but I guess you can add thoughts from anything or thoughts on betas.
When you play specialized elements, which element do you pick?
It's got to be fire.
Right.
There are other elements.
Inferno, Burning, Ellie, the Max.
Fire, specialized
Staff,
element.
Quarters.
For sure. The best one. I might pretend that you can, play daggers, just burning speed over and over and over. It's probably Scepter. So let's just go ahead and wrap up. Thanks everyone for watching. Thanks everyone who stuck with us through 3 weeks in a row of hour and a half of the two of us rambling here about elite specializations. Hopefully you saw some stuff that got you excited. Hopefully you saw some stuff that made you want to log in during the beta. We're historically bad at outros, so let's just wrap it up.
Yep.
We will see you guys in the beta, whether that's in the mists or not in the mists. It could be either one. Thanks all for watching, and have a good weekend.